Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and patch 10.1.5 brought with it many new class changes. And while some of us saw massive talented revamps, others saw fairly sizable damage improvements. The class of Rogue has gotten even more deadly, as the spec of Outlaw was the one to receive some of its biggest changes. As patch 10.1.5 finally removes some of their unique gear borrowed power dependency, and then shackles the damage of some of the basic combat abilities, and even improves one of the worst combat buffs from Roll the Bones, making it far more powerful within PvE content. This newest set of 10.1.5 changes has allowed Outlaw Rogues to shift their builds in a new direction, where we've started to see Outlaw Rogue players slowly climb to a more competitive footing, and even in some cases begin to surpass the more popular rogue spec of Subtlety. In today's video, I wanted to do an up-to-date Outlaw Rogue PvE guide, which highlights all of the newest changes, while keeping this guide a comprehensive experience for any new players looking to explore the spec of Outlaw for the patch 10.1.5. But right before we get into this update guide video, most of you guys watching these videos are still not subscribed. However, the more of you are mine, the more of you do, so let's keep it going. Subscribe to the channel and ring the bell if you're watching these videos anyway, especially if you want to get more regular content regarding all of the newest Dragonflight updates and changes going forward. I like to start off my guide videos by going over the talent builds first, starting with the single target raiding build, which is centered around the keep it rolling buff focused playstyle. Since the release of the patch 10.1.5, the keep it rolling builds are significantly ahead of their ambush counterparts, fueled by what feels like an infinite amount of combo points, while still adapting parts of the ambush playstyle as part of its basic rotation. Up next, we have two viable builds for Mythic Plus dungeons, starting with the ambush dungeon build, focused on regular uses of ambush as part of the base rotation. The other viable build is the Echoing Reprimand playstyle, together with Keep It Rolling, which takes aspects of the raiding build but modifies it to be less reliant on cooldowns. Next, I want to go over how to itemize your Outlaw Rogue in the patch 10.1.5. If you're serious about maximizing your rogue, then I highly suggest using raid bot sims to help you better optimize your gear. Simcraft has an add-on which can snag all of your character's items. This means your current equipment as well as anything left sitting in your bags. Raid bots can help you compare all available items and find out which pieces may be your biggest upgrade. You can even compare and find out which items are worth upgrading using crests and flight stones, and even simulate different scenarios to find out just how much damage you should be doing against bosses, dungeon encounters, and even when simply hitting a training dummy. However, if you are new to the class of Rogue and are looking for a more simplified gearing advice, then this is how you can get started. Your best primary stat will be agility, and in most cases any items that have more agility are going to be worth the upgrade. Though for Outlaw Rogues, your secondary stats are almost just as important as agility. Your best secondary stats are going to be versatility and critical strike, which are both fairly equal in value, followed by mastery with haste as your dead last option. Next, let's go over some of the items that you should be on the lookout for, starting with some of our best weapons from dungeons. Be on the lookout for the Forge Storm from the Dungeon of Neltharis, and the Krog Tusk from the Dungeon of Underrot. Alternatively, the new Mega Dungeon of Dawn of the Infinite has a new dagger called Nick of Time, which has a unique Time Strike bonus and can also be worn in the offhand for the Outlaw Rogue. When it comes to gearing through the raid of Aberrus, be on the lookout for the claws of the Blazing Behemoth from the boss of Magmorax. When it comes to Outlaw Rogue trinkets, your best ones will come from the raid of Aberrus, with the bomb trinket dropped from the Vigilant Steward, as well as the beacon from the last boss of Sarkareth. When it comes to gearing through dungeons, your better trinket choices will be the Frenzian Flare from the Brackenhide, as well as the Mutated Scale from the Dungeon of Neltharis. You will also want to work towards your tier set for the patch 10.1.5. Both the 2 set and the 4 set bonus are passive, but will significantly increase your overall damage output. You can either acquire your tier set by saying the bosses within the raid of Aberrus, or by converting most of the Season 2 gear obtained through raids, dungeons, and certain open world activities into tier set pieces through the Revival Catalyst. Next, let's go over the updates to the playstyle and the rotation of the Outlaw Rogue, and highlight what has changed for the spec in patch 10.1.5. The core of Outlaw hasn't changed much. It is still a fast-paced spec focused on building and spending common points as efficiently as possible. The spec is still focused on managing the combat buffs gained from Roll the Bones, and have to make decisions on whether to keep your current set of buffs or to reroll for a better outcome. Outlaw rogues don't necessarily have a strict combat rotation. Rather, they have a priority system of builders and spenders, each with their own set of rules that make certain attacks your top priority. First, let's go over the common point builders, starting with Sinister Strike, which is a basic common point builder which generates 1 common point. At times, Sinister Strike can attack twice in a row, causing it to generate additional common points while providing you with a proc of Opportunity. With Opportunity, your pistol shots become cheaper to cast and deal significantly more damage. Pistol Shot also benefits from talents like Fan the Hammer, which causes it to fire multiple times while generating even more common points. In most cases, Pistol Shot is your top priority builder whenever you gain Opportunity procs, as long as you aren't sitting at maximum common points. Next, we have Ambush, which we have access to whenever we are in stealth. Ambush becomes available when we use Vanish, but also during the cooldowns such as Shadow Dance. And through the talent of Audacity, you sometimes get to use Ambush after using a pistol shot. In most cases, Ambush is our highest priority builder whenever it is available, as long as you are not sitting on maximum common points. Next, we have the talent of Echo and Reprimand, which generates 2 common points and causes your next few common points to become supercharged. When that happens, your common points will change the color from red to blue. Finishers which land on that common point are further empowered, dealing significantly more damage, so be on the lookout for those supercharged common points. Next, once you have amassed at least 6 or more common points, it is time to invest them into a finisher. Our first priority finisher will be Slice and Dice, which helps enhance our auto attacks, which can lead to better energy regen and allows for additional damage procs. Slice and Dice should be maintained at all times during combat and only refreshed when it's about to fall off. Next, we have Between the Eyes, a finisher which deals damage from range. This damage is a lot more potent when Between the Eyes lands a critical hit. Between the Eyes also marks your target, making them easier for you to land a critical strike against them. We want to keep Between the Eyes on cooldown at all times. However, when playing the talent of Greenskin, we don't use Between the Eyes until the Greenskin proc has been consumed. When Between the Eyes is on cooldown and Slice and Dice does not need to be refreshed, we spend the rest of our common points on the finisher of Dispatch. Next, let's go over how to properly manage the buff mechanic of Roll the Bones. When we use Roll the Bones, we have a chance to generate a random assortment of 6 potential buffs, either as a 1 buff, 2 buff, or a rare 5 buff combo. These buffs are separated as either high priority or low priority, and we use the priority system to help us make impactful combat decisions. The high priority buffs include Broadside, which causes us to generate additional common points from our builders, and those builders will deal additional damage. The next is Skull and Crossbones, which amplifies our Sinister Strike double hit proc rate. The buff of True Bearing allows us to increase our cooldown reduction benefits. Then we have the buff of Grand Melee, which saw a new revamp for the patch 10.1.5. Its newest effect bolsters the effectiveness of Blade Flurry during cleave and AoE situations. Additionally, Blade Flurry is also able to cleave our primary target, which will have an impact on our single target rotation. As of the moment, Grand Melee is a high priority buff within cleave and AoE encounters, so it has some situational value. Ruthless Precision, also known as the Shark buff because of its shark icon, increases our critical strike chance, but because Outlaw gains a lot of artificial crit chance from its combat abilities, this buff isn't as potent on its own. Finally, we have Buried Treasure, which helps restore our energy. Currently, this is our only low priority buff. In most cases, it is perfectly acceptable to keep any single buff or a combination of buffs as long as one of them is a high priority buff. When playing loaded dice, using Adrenaline Rush tilts the dice in your favor, causing us to re-roll into a guaranteed 2 buff combo minimum. When loaded dice is active, we want to roll out of any solo buffs, or any buff combination that does not contain a Skull and Crossbones, True Bearing, Broadsides, or Grand Melee in AoE situations. Next, I want to go over how to optimally use all of Outlaw Rogue's large array of offensive cooldowns, starting with Adrenaline Rush. Adrenaline Rush should ideally be used on cooldown at all times. We use Adrenaline with 2 or less combo points when talented into the improved ability version. Dreadblades, just like Adrenaline Rush, should also be used on cooldown as often as possible. And the similar rules apply to Dreadblades, as you will try to use this ability with 2 combo points or less to help minimize resource wastefulness. During Dreadblades, your builders will generate maximum combo points, so be careful as to not waste any of your resources. Vanish should also be used ideally on cooldown. Preferably, you should vanish right as you're about to use Dispatch, as it does gain some additional value when used from stealth. Keep It Rolling should be used whenever you have at least 3 high value buffs present. The Shark buff can be included as a 3-part buff combo. When talented into Blade Rush, try to use it on cooldown as much as possible, as long as you're sitting below 80 energy. When talented into Subtlety, you should try to use this ability whenever you are very low on energy, to maximize its resource restoration value. When talented into Cold Blood, you should try to use this ability right before you use Dispatch. You can even tie Cold Blood into Dispatch in a single macro to make it easy to use. Finally, we have Shadow Dance. Whenever Shadow Dance is active, Ambush becomes your top priority ability. Although it is perfectly normal to also delay Shadow Dance while we have access to Vanish or if Audacity proc is currently active. And finally, we have Blade Flurry, which is our most important AoE cooldown. Outlaw Rogue's rotation does not change in AoE situations. You will still follow your signal target priority while maintaining Blade Flurry so that it can cleave nearby enemy targets. In most cases, as long as you're hitting more than one target, you should try to maintain Blade Flurry up at all times. Blade Flurry should also be maintained at all times while the Grand Melee buff is active, even in single target encounters. And you should try not to refresh Blade Flurry too early. Try to maximize its uptime as best as you can and only refresh it once the buff has fallen off. Next, let's go over some of the best crafted items that you should prioritize with the work order system. For Outlaw Rogues, your best crafted gear has not changed too much since the patch 10.1.5. You will still want to prioritize on getting the Slimy Boots embellishment, together with one additional leather item that is embellished with a toxified armor patch, which further enhances the value of the Slimy Boots. Likewise, our Enchants and Consumables have not changed much for the patch 10.1.5. Like usual, I will list all of our consumables from the top inexpensive must-have items, then cover all of the supplemental extra that are lower in priority. For your flask, we want to use the Tepid Versatility. Weapons should be enhanced with the Buzzing Rune to gain additional critical strike. For food, we want to use either a Raid Feast or the Deviled Eggs as a solo consumable. Next, we want to either use the Elemental Potion of Power in single target fights or the Shocking Disclosure Potion in Mythic Plus dungeon scenarios. Lastly, there is Augment Runes, which further increase your character's power, but these are quite expensive and will fade away whenever you die, so they are best to be used sparingly. For your enchants, we will want to prioritize Sophic Devotion for your weapons, though Shadow Flame may seem better in single target encounters. Sophic does seem like a best option for all-around gameplay. Your chest item should be enchanted with Awaking stats. Cloak and Bracers should be enhanced with Leech. Boots can be enhanced with the Plain Runner's Breeze. Legs should be enhanced with a Fierce Armor Kit. Rings should either have Versatility or Critical Strike, and it's best to use the secondary stat of which you have less of currently. Your belt can be enchanted with a Shadowed Belt Clasp, but only if you can afford it. Finally, for our gems, most sockets will be filled with the Radiant Malachite, but at least one of your gem sockets should contain a Resplendent Diamond, if you could find a Jewel Crafter to make it one through the work order system. As per usual, if you guys enjoyed this video or found it informative, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. And as always, in the description of every single video and live stream, we have a link to our Discord community channel. Probably the best place to reach out to me directly in case you want to let me know what you thought about this video or hang out with the rest of the community to discuss some of the upcoming changes. Join our Discord to become part of the community. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.